Thank you. You have a very good list of priorities there. Under nuclear R&D, one of the things that really needs to happen in this country is new next generation reactors need to be built. And whether it's an NGNP or any of the so-called small modular reactors, we've got to find a way in this country to get them built. And most, if not all of them, probably require consistent through time government support. And with a one-year appropriation cycle, that doesn't seem to happen very often. Do you know have any thoughts about how that nut might be cracked?
Did everybody hear the question? I won't repeat the entire question. The essence of it was for the construction of the new reactors of all types that we need to focus on, we need a consistent support at the federal budgetary level rather than these peaks and valleys that ebb and flow with the political dynamics in the country. And Mark's question was, do I have a solution for that? No. I'm sorry. I mean, and you're not the only industry that has asked that question or deals with that concern. In fact, in my opinion, particularly in terms of our infrastructure in the United States and the key research that we do where the government is so heavily engaged, this is one of the most common questions there is, because the political dynamics that fluctuate with elections impact the budget decision-making process. And a number of us have explored in the past, in fact, I've been a part of hearings on this issue, as to how can we create something so we can bind future Congresses to do it the way it ought to be done. And so far we have not found a way to bind a future Congress. It's very frustrating. In fact, I've often lamented that, you know how when we budget in Congress we have 10-year budgets or 5-year budgets depending on which time frame we choose, and that's a political decision also. And so we'll budget out what we need to do for the next 5 or 10 years. I've often lamented that having served in Congress now since 1992, I have never been in the second year of any budget. Because literally every year the Budget Committee on which I sit creates a new budget with a new 5-year or 10-year projection, and we do year 1 of that budget. And as we are speaking, the Budget Committee is taking last year's budget and redoing it, and we will have a new budget, and I guarantee you that this year's budget will not look anything like year 2 of last year's budget said it should have looked. And I'm sorry, so I'm really just restating the question. The only thing that I think can really solve that is consistent political pressure. And to the extent that we have consistent political support for a project, in this case for nuclear research or for nuclear production, R&D, then we can continue to sustain it in the budget, because the reason it ebbs and flows is because the political support ebbs and flows. So really there is no way for Congress to make that happen, and Congress will continue to reflect the will of the people. Elections do have consequences, and the solution is in the political level, at the political level, really, among you.
Another question? In the back here?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I just have a question concerning energy independence. The DOD has a 6-year POM process where they plan out their budgets, all right? I just don't understand how, with all respect, the Senate doesn't put energy independence somewhere near the same level of urgency and consistent planning as defense. Defense is important. We all know that. I'm a retired Navy captain. I will say that. However, energy independence is just right there. Okay, so there are other solutions besides nuclear, but nuclear is a central solution to that. So why? Is there an awareness? My question to you is there a consistent awareness of that in your important august group of 100 legislators, that energy independence and climate change and emissions are also important? I'm talking about a separate thing here.
Right.
And how dangerous it is to not solve that. And why isn't that up there somewhere close to national defense that is consistently planned for 6 years?
It's an excellent question, and let me first say I completely share your frustration. I believe that our energy policy, particularly the issue of our national energy independence, is a critical part of our national defense, as well as our national economic circumstances, and that Congress should recognize that and treat it more aggressively and deal with it more aggressively. Your question is, don't they get it, or why don't they get it? And I'll attempt an answer. First of all, I think if you polled all 100 senators, they would agree with you as well. And if you listen to the rhetoric and to the speeches, they get it. They understand that we need to achieve national energy independence. Where it breaks down, but I personally think that the level to which they really mean it varies. But I think most senators would say that they agree that we need to have as one of our top priorities developing national energy independence. But from there, it begins to break down dramatically in terms of the politics that I referenced earlier. The Republicans, as you, I'm sure, have seen, are constantly talking about an all-of-the-above policy, which includes carbon sources of energy, drilling offshore, opening ANWR, developing the oil shale, clean coal technologies, and the like. The Democrats have significantly resisted those efforts of developing a national energy policy as a party. I mean, there's going to be some on each side of that issue in both parties, but generally as a party, the Democratic Party has strongly resisted any energy policy that focuses on development of our own carbon-based resources, particularly petroleum and coal. And because of that fight, which is a sort of a 30,000-foot fight over the philosophy of how we should approach energy, we have not been able to move forward very well. We've had some smaller steps taken, but we have not been able to take the real strong, solid, aggressive steps that you suggest need to be taken because we continue to get bogged down in the battle over the politics surrounding carbon. And because of that, it's easy for members of the Senate or the House to talk the talk, but not get to the end of the row in terms of the solutions. And you might say, well, then why don't you get to the areas where you agree? Because we can agree on the need for major conservation efforts where we could maybe get up to 30% savings globally just through efficiencies and new research and conservation. We agree on the alternative and renewable fuel focus, whether it be wind and solar. We're starting, as I just discussed, to get much more agreement on nuclear. And the list goes on. And so you might ask, well, why don't you go aggressively forward in those areas where you agree? And some of us are now working to try to do that, to do just that, to take the steps we can take. And to some extent, we have taken those steps in some arenas, but we just have not yet, because of the politics, been able to get there.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Right here, Gwyneth.
Gwyneth Crapo, I'm a writer. I want to thank Idaho National Laboratories because you were foremost in developing reactor technology, and other countries around the world have taken it and run with it while we're watching with our arms folded. And these other countries are now exporting their technologies that they got from us, and with the help of their governments. In other words, you have companies like Arriva who are in partnership with the French government in a way our companies aren't. Is there anything that can be done to apprise Congress of this situation, which is interfering with one of the great strengths of America in the past, which is exportation of our technology and our know-how? That's being, we're being cut off from that because we don't seem to have the kind of national support that other countries do.
Now, that's a very good question again, and again, for those that may not have heard it, there's a lot of, to summarize very briefly, there's a tremendous amount of governmental support for nuclear in other countries where the government partners much more aggressively with and helps to promote much more aggressively the nuclear power and the technology. And is there a way we can make sure that our Congress and our policymakers understand this, and I assume, hopefully, agree to participate in the same kind of support level at the United States? I believe that for those in the Congress who are focused on this, and increasingly it's more and more, that there is an understanding of that. But we are, I guess at the early stages, we are, in my opinion, we are just starting to crest right now in terms of building back from the very negative politics that surrounded nuclear energy for the last 20 years or so. And like I say, over the last 10 years, I think the public, as well as the policymakers, have really changed their point of view on nuclear power, and we're building to where we can get to the point that the government can take those extra, more aggressive steps that you talk about. Right now, we're, as I indicated in my remarks, we're really happy that the President has announced a more robust proposal for loan guarantees, and actually that the Department of Energy has announced the first loan guarantee is going to start taking place, and so we're at those first steps. I wish that we had never back in the 90s slowed down the nuclear R&D, and that we had been able to build from that platform to where we could have been today on nuclear power. But we went into a valley for a while, and now we're climbing up the other side of that mountain, and when we get to the top, I think maybe we can do some of the things you've suggested. So the answer is just that, unfortunately, because of the politics in the United States, we lost a lot of momentum, and that momentum could have put us where you suggest we should be. We're just building back now to get to where we can get there.
Well, let's thank our speakers.
Thank you very much.